Welcome once again to Generally Nerdy. I am Dustin, and I am Generally Nerdy. Today, we are going to talk about Mosh Pit Etiquette. There is such a thing. For those of you who do not know, before we get into the episode, please remember to like, subscribe, share, retweet. It definitely helps me out a lot to get more people to watch the show, to get more people to listen to the episodes, all of that wonderfulness. There's definitely a lot you can do just by subscribing and sharing and following. You can find me at www.generallynerdy.net. You can also find me on Twitter at generally_nerdy. On Instagram at generallynerdy, all one word. On Facebook.com/generallynerdy. And once again, the website is www.generallynerdy.net.
Generally Nerdy.
Mosh Pit Etiquette.
Mosh Pit Etiquette.
For those of you who watch this show and are not aware of a couple of things. One, I like heavy metal. I like very heavy music. Some of my favorite bands include Lamb of God, Meshuggah, Neurosis, Dillinger Escape Plan, Converge, Botch, things of that nature. I feel like I'm kind of dating myself because I didn't say any of the newer bands that I like, but such is life. So, because I like this heavy style of music, one of the things I often engage in when I go to concerts is the mosh pit. Now, for the uninitiated, and there are many who are unaware of the culture in which I partake, a mosh pit is a form, in a lot of ways, is a form of dancing. And I understand this wholeheartedly. There are many different ways to engage in such musical endeavors. There are many different misconceptions about the mosh pit. One of these misconceptions is that it's just violence for the sake of violence. Now, it is a violent act that you definitely run the risk of hurting yourself should you choose to engage in the mosh pit. Though that is not the intent of the mosh pit. The people who are unfamiliar with pitting, because it is viewed as such a violent act, because it is viewed as violence for the sake of violence, think that guys, because traditionally and stereotypically it is just a bunch of dudes, think that guys only get in the pit because they want to, as Real Big Fish would say, gonna get in the pit and punch and kick, gonna get in the pit and fuck up shit. It's not the intent. It is a way to work out aggression of sorts, yes. It is a way to physically appreciate aggressive and heavy music. It is not a way to harm other people. It is simply an expression of appreciation for heavy music. Now, that being said, there are different subsects of pitters, if you will. There are those, again, the quote-unquote jock pitter. I really hate to use the term jock for anything, just because of the way I was brought up. But I mean, to hardcore kids and to the disenfranchised, the general types of people who engage in pitting, a jock is kind of a meathead, a lunk, if you will. So these meatheads get in the pit, and they get in because they don't understand what it is. They get in and start punching people, and they get in and start fights. And a pit is not a fight. Pit is not a fight.
It's not a fight.
Pit is an aggressive expression of appreciation for heavy music. So if you get in and you start throwing punches during, say, a circle pit, or really most style pits, you're going to piss off a lot of people, and you're likely going to get your ass beat for trying to beat others. Now, hardcore kids, alright, so let's kind of cover the styles of pit. So there is the chaotic pit, which is effectively just everyone bumping into each other. There's a lot of pushing going on, very little punching and kicking. People will put their feet out as a means of protection to keep larger dudes away from them, larger folk, I guess, because there are definitely large women who enjoy pitting as well. There are all shapes and sizes of both genders who enjoy the pit. And when you're small and you see a Slayer fan, the Slayer fan is kind of a general term, not necessarily that they are into Slayer, but they are large, drunk, and probably wearing a hockey jersey of some sort. So therefore, they feel no pain, and they're bigger than you, and you're going to get hurt if you don't protect yourself. Now, this style of protection in a chaotic pit sometimes requires a foot. You've got to put a leg up there to keep this person away from you, and sometimes it's necessary. You're not kicking this person, you're effectively just pushing them with your foot. So chaotic pit is a lot of bumping and pushing. Occasionally there is a leg involved, but again, that's just a push. That's not a kick. So there's the chaotic pit. There is the more organized version of the chaotic pit, which is a circle pit. Circle pit is very much what it describes. Circle pit is often used in less aggressive forms of music, like punk rock, which, again, there's debate there. Punk rock is fairly aggressive. But then the even lesser aggressive form of music, ska, there's oftentimes a circle pit at a ska show. Circle pits, there's a lot less pushing, a lot more dancing. There are certain moves. You can look them up on YouTube. You can Google it. I think even the first Decline of Western Civilization documentary documents some of the moves that people use in a pit, and traditional, and more often than not necessarily tradition, but more often than not, these dance moves, as you might call them, are used in a circle pit more often than a chaotic pit. Circle pits are a lot of fun as long as everybody's engaging. Effectively, what you're doing is you're moving in a circle, as the name would imply, and skanking or doing a number of dance moves in which will travel you around the circle with the rest of the group. And then there is what I refer to as a hardcore pit. Now, in spite of what the name might imply, a hardcore pit, in my eyes, is oftentimes less of a worry and is oftentimes more of a show than like in a chaotic pit. My preference when I'm pitting is the chaos. I enjoy bumping and pushing and, you know, movement. A hardcore pit is generally speaking is when hardcore kids who are into quote unquote hardcore music, which is a variation of punk rock. It's the more thrashy, aggressive version of punk rock, effectively. They get in, and this is the most highly choreographed version of a mosh pit, is a hardcore pit, because they'll get in small groups, anywhere from one. I mean, so a group of hardcore kids will start a hardcore pit. They will form the circle in which there is nothing in the center, and then they will get in, depending on the size of the show, in various numbers. I've seen anywhere from 1 to about 10 hardcore kids get in a hardcore pit at one time. Again, varying depending on the size of the show. They will. It's like karate moves. They punch and kick, and they do donkey kicks, and it's very, very highly choreographed. So in spite of the fact that they are throwing punches, nobody usually gets hurt because they're not touching one another. And even if there's like 15 of these kids in a circle, they're not hitting each other, even though they're throwing kicks and throwing punches. Honestly, the first time I ran into it was kind of an affront to what I knew of as pitting, because I only knew of circle pits and chaotic pits before. And it was kind of an affront to that, because it's very much stay out of my personal bubble, I want to dance. And very much not aggressive. It in spite of the way it looks, it's very unaggressive, because if you, as happens very frequently, if there is a hardcore pit and there is somebody who wants to start a more chaotic pit, who gets in the middle of that, there's going to be a fight, because these kids are punching and kicking, whereas the chaotic pit person is pushing and shoving and moving around. Choreographing your emotions feels far too contrived, and that's why it seems insincere to me. Now, as you may remember from my previous video, at the Protest the Hero, the show last week, it was Protest the Hero and August Burns Red, and I caught a fist to the face, which is healing up a little more slowly than I would like. But I caught a fist to the face, and it split my top and bottom lip. I can still feel it a little bit in my nose, and it knocked at least one of my teeth loose for a couple of days. I caught this fist because the person who threw the punch, by my observation, was unaware of the true nature of a pit. He was one who was uninitiated in the etiquette, and was effectively moving like he wanted to join in the chaotic pit, which was what I was a part of, but was also throwing punches in the interim. And one of those punches caught me in the side of the face. I, in turn, next time he came around the circle, grabbed him and bounced his head across the pit, because when you break protocol, you piss people off. And oftentimes, if you piss people off, you're going to get hurt in return. And I thankfully did not hurt this person too bad. He was a little bit bigger than me, but I mean, so I would hope he could take the fall. But the venue that we were at, there was a step. The floor is multi-tiered, and is separated by a number of steps. And so when I threw him across the pit, I was afraid that his head had hit the step that was on the far side of the pit, After a few seconds, he stood up and seemed to be okay, so I figured point proven. You don't swing, you don't throw fists when there is a jumble of bodies in the middle of a pit. So as far as etiquette goes, that is primary rule number 1, is you don't go in with the intent of hurting somebody. Now, you do go in with the understanding that you may get hurt unintentionally, but if there is intent behind your injury, then somebody has broken protocol, and they need to be reminded of their place in the pit. Primary rule number 2 of pit etiquette: if somebody falls, immediately that person must be picked up. Nobody wants to get trampled, and if there's a circle pit, somebody's gonna fall. If there's a chaotic pit, somebody's gonna fall. They're gonna trip over their own feet. Somebody's gonna step on their feet and trip them up. Something's going to happen that, and as soon as somebody hits the floor, there's so many bodies in motion, it's not long before they could get seriously injured. Usually 2 or 3 people will converge on a fallen body, pick them up, and if they are okay, work them back into the rotation of the pit. If they are injured, then usually 1 or 2 of those people will escort them out to the side of the pit, at which point it is on the venue to make sure that their patron has not received a major injury. Primary rules. These 2 rules, regardless of the show, regardless of the style of pit, always trump everything else that's going on around them. I've been to shows where even the band on stage will stop playing if they see somebody fall. Primary rule number 3, this one is less observed but should be more widely observed, is if you get hurt, assess the intent. Is it just happenstance? Is it just something that happened because you're in a pit? Because you will, as previously stated, get hurt. It's just kind of a thing. However, is somebody purposefully out there throwing punches? Is somebody purposefully out there hurting people? I was at a show years ago. It was a smaller show at a smaller venue. So the floor, there wasn't a whole lot of people there. So on the floor, you have about 3 or 4 people deep at the foot of the stage, and then immediately behind that 4th person is where the pit opened up. And so the people on the edge of the pit are not aware of the pit necessarily. Like, yes, they know it's behind them, but their intent is not to engage in pitting activity. Their intent is to be as close to the stage and see the band on stage as possible, as close as possible. So if the pit erupts and somebody at the edge of the pit, catches a push or a shove, that's expected. However, this particular show was a hardcore show, and so the kids got bored of dancing, and the chaotic style pitters were tired because it is a hell of a workout. And in the interim between the hardcore pit and the chaotic pit, and there were very few circle pits that night, 2 of these hardcore pit kids, one of them a little bit larger, they would lock elbows, back to back, lock elbows, and then the larger one would bend over and twist his back in such a way that would fling the smaller guy at the people who are not engaging in the pit. Now, generally speaking, these people are often female and usually small, regardless of gender. So what these guys were doing were just being assholes and trying to hurt people who weren't even trying to pit. So in these instances, when you have clear evidence that these people are just assholes and trying to hurt somebody, that is fair game to take them out. You try to avoid fights. That is the extension of rule number 3. If it was unintentional, then you cannot get pissed off that you just got hurt. You avoid a fight at all costs because a pit is not a fight. A pit is not a fight. However, if somebody is being an asshole, they are starting a fight, and it is on you and anyone else who is of proper mind, a sound mind, to put an end to their assholery. Sure, this should be put on to the venue, people who work at the venue, the security and whatnot. However, oftentimes the venue does not understand the nature of a pit, and they do not see the fight until it has broken out and is large. Oftentimes until somebody's already hurt. So it is on the people in the pit who are aware of the etiquette and aware of the intent of said asshole, to stop them from being an asshole before a fight does break out. In this particular case, my means of stopping these two hardcore kids from being assholes was when the larger guy bent over with the small guy on his back. Before he could rotate, I grabbed the small guy by the chin and yanked him off of the back of the larger guy. And in response, for the rest of the show, they were all trying to hurt me, which they failed at completely. Because generally speaking, and I'll put a wedge here. Generally speaking, hardcore kids are kind of pussies, which is why when they pit, they don't touch. They can put on a great front, but they are really big douchebags, and very much every single one of them, from my experience, is kind of a pussy. So yes, those are the three main rules of etiquette. Now, sometimes, depending on the show, depending on the genre of music, you will run into pits where there are often small females. Generally speaking, these pits will follow those same three guidelines. However, sometimes you get guys who think they have to protect the girls, and I'm not entirely sure why this is. I mean, a little bit, because some guys think they have to protect girls. My stance is, if the girl steps into the pit, then she understands what she's stepping into. So, I take with that what I will. I'm not out there trying to hurt anybody. I'm not trying to be an asshole, but if there's a girl next to me and I'm moving through a pit and I'm in the process of clearing way for me to move through the pit, then she will be cleared just like any other guy. I take very little exception for anybody in the pit. Now, if there's somebody who clearly does not understand what's going on, as evidenced by the Protest the Hero show, there was an older lady who was standing in the middle of a pit that appeared to have just broken out. I'm not entirely sure she walked into the pit. I'm almost certain she didn't walk into the pit. Oftentimes pits will close and then open up in random places, so there's no, you can't always predict where there's going to be a pit. So she, was unaware that there was a pit around her, as can happen. As I said, it can be a little confusing if you're not used to the culture. She was promptly escorted. Somebody saw what was going on, walked through the pit and grabbed her, moved her to the ring of the pit. She, during that process, appeared to have been injured in some way, and so she was escorted out of the crowd even by this person, luckily, because she could have very well been injured very badly. But it's etiquette. You're not an asshole. You're a nice person. You are there to express aggressively your appreciation for the music you're listening to, which is aggressive and oftentimes very heavy music. And you're there. The bottom line is, everybody's there to have fun. If you are there and you do not have fun, you've done something wrong. These are the basics of pit etiquette. If you have something to add, if you have a comment, if I missed a style of pit that you are a fan of, let me know. Comment section below. And I thank you very much for watching. If it is generally nerdy, then by God, it's probably here.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, ma'am, can I